everyone, and welcome back to the Rebel Eaters Club with commentary. I'm very sorry about the Wednesday video. I don't know what happened. I'm hoping this turns out okay. I'm a little nervous now because I have no idea what happened before, why the audio got so fucking garbled. But we're going to just go ahead and listen and hope for the best. And so we're listening to the second half of episode 1, which is still called All Food is Good Food with Mia Fier.
Is the ideal body.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing my Mexican grandmother who's making the food that I'm connecting with home, but also connecting with my racialization as evil.
Me too. Virgie, me too. The bagel, there was something so Jewish about it. And I not only hated my body, but I hated my Jewish body. This is not something that I have fully resolved. You know, the bagel for me, like, it was like the perfect food to hate. You know, it wasn't just like chocolate, or it wasn't just like ice cream. This like food that like everyone loves. And then, you know, people on a diet are like, no, you know, the bagel was like, it symbolized my cultural background as a Jew and how at odds I was with that.
Totally.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, of course it does. Yeah. Of course. I mean, yes. I mean, I'm wondering, like, you know, you kind of mentioned when we were first talking about it, you're kind of returned to the bagel during pregnancy. And I kind of wanted to hear this story.
Yeah. I got pregnant in 2015 and there were just some foods I did not want.
Right.
You know, and there were some foods where, you know, the cravings just really took over. And it was, I mean, all I wanted was a fucking bagel. All I wanted was a fucking bagel. Like, and it was a plain bagel, no seeds, no flavor, with plain cream cheese. It's all I wanted, motherfucker. Like, just give me, just bring it to me. And, you know, something kind of animal happens when you're pregnant. You start to smell more and you sense more and you're like, you know, like you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm pretending to be a little animal sniffing around through garbage looking for that perfect treat. And like, that's kind of what I was becoming. And when I wanted a bagel, which was kind of all I wanted, I made sure I got one.
And did it create like static for you, that intense craving?
Every time, because I still was like, I can't believe I'm eating a bagel. Mia, do you understand? Your body is going to do all this crazy shit and you're probably going to gain all this weight and the world's going to end and you're going to have a child and you know, but the bagel was eaten.
Yes.
Because it was all I didn't want anything else.
Totally.
And even during my birth, I just remember this moment while I was giving birth. I had my son Galileo in my house, in my own bed. And I was pushing and it was like screaming and it was like I was an animal and I was trying to bite my doula in her face and, you know, and it was storming outside and it was, you know, like 4 a.m. And I remember my partner said, he's like, Mia, you look so beautiful right now. And I just was like, shut the fuck up. I'm so fat. Why are you even telling me this right now? Like because I was so deeply invested in the fact that I like my body was wrong that
So I don't mean to like judge her perspective or say that her interpretation of events isn't correct, but I find it weird that she's like, I'm in this pain. She said she gave birth to her son in her own bed, meaning she probably didn't have an epidural. It was full-on natural birth, which is super painful. And granted, I've never been pregnant. I've never given birth. But from what I understand, anytime, like, pain, discomfort, anger, and exhaustion are the primary feelings when giving birth, like when you're in the middle of it. So him saying you look so beautiful right now, I think she would have been pissed off regardless. I don't necessarily think that this was her internalized fat phobia or whatever the fuck she's about to say. It's like, you were in the middle of giving birth, He's saying you're beautiful and you feel like shit. Like that you're gonna be pissed off. You're uncomfortable. You're in pain. There's this human being pushed out of your body. You're sweaty. You're exhausted. No, you don't want to hear that you're beautiful right now. But let's see what she actually says.
Even in that moment when my body was doing like the most magical thing it's ever done, and I even had somebody right there rooting me on, and I just couldn't even shake diet culture in that moment. And then when I think back to that, how depressing. What a shame.
I find it a shame that you were... This is another one where I'm like, is she editorializing? Because I have a hard time, again, never been pregnant, never given birth, so perhaps I have no right to say this. I'm merely going based on what other people have described with their birthing experiences. But from what I understand, at some point you don't give a fuck. Your legs are spread open wide trying to push this baby out. A parade could go through your hospital room and you aren't gonna give a fuck. Because it's all about getting that baby out of your body. I could be wrong. This is something where I don't want to say like my perception is correct because this is an experience that I have not experienced. And so perhaps I'm wrong, but if you have given birth, please tell me, do you think that this seems accurate or if this is editorialized based on your perspective and your birthing experience? Because I'm curious.
That like I have to have that memory poisoning my experience. I mean, I'll forever look back on that. You know, I chose to have a home birth so I could be really present, and yet I was not present. I was still having thoughts that I needed to be skinny in that moment. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
We are back. A couple years after Mia gave birth, she came to Babe Camp. That's the workshop I do with women where we get free from the lies we're told about our bodies. Remember, Mia's an artist. She takes found industrial materials and makes huge, human-sized sculptures. Not long after Babe Camp, she was asked to do an installation in a decommissioned greenhouse in the LA Arboretum.
This greenhouse is kind of like this derelict little shit box. It's been vacant for decades. It is like this ruinous structure that's made of wood and glass, and it's kind of fucked up. It's gnarly, like the glass is kind of smashed out in parts, and spent some time in this greenhouse and also thought about kind of the journey that I've been on in my own body, getting pregnant, letting go of diet culture, you know, really sort of reprioritizing the things that I was going to put my energy into, which was not shrinking myself. Like it was like glaring. It was a glaring problem for me to wake up in the morning and say, well, what was I going to do today? Am I going to go to the gym and then spend the rest of the day worrying about what I was going to not eat? Or, you know, or was I just going to go to my fucking studio? There was nothing about shrinking my body that felt remotely important, felt like anything I needed to bother with. It felt like something that was, if anything, working against me. It was
Totally.
it was like actually actively working against me. And as soon as that shit started to melt away, I was thinking, I want to make this like celebratory body of work, pun intended.
Yes.
And I wanted to use my own body. I wanted to use the body.
The funny thing is that it's unfortunate because she's like, you know, did I want to go to the gym and then spend all day worrying about what I wasn't going to eat, or did I want to go to my studio? And it's like there was a compromise there. You could go do your workout, have a high protein snack, go to your studio, and not worry about what you're going to eat later. You'll figure that out when you get hungry, or maybe pre-plan your meals for the week. Like you don't even have to do like a full-on prep, but just have a general idea of what you plan on eating. And that way you're not worrying so much about it. Like, it doesn't have to be this all-consuming thing if you don't want it to be. And there's a few exceptions for people that are prone to obsessive behaviors, where perhaps this wouldn't work for them. I'm not... Well, maybe she is the type of person, because she talked about as a kid going to bed at night dreaming of her morning bagel. So perhaps there's a bit of a food obsession, be it in one direction or another, for her. I could be wrong, but that's kind of the general impression that I'm getting. But sometimes I do wonder if these people ever tried a middle ground, or if they view weight loss as, like, either it's completely hands off, I'm not going to monitor what I eat at all, and I'm going to eat whatever I want, whenever I want, in the amount that I want, and fuck the consequences. Or if they go to the other extreme of, I'm going to measure my food, work out 3 times a day, not have more than 1,200 calories, and do nothing but obsess over every little thing that I put in my mouth. There is a middle ground of reasonable exercise, general guideline that you try to stay within, and you work on not going over most days. There is a middle ground here.
Bodies of brilliant women around me. I was moved to create an installation in that greenhouse of these fictional goddess figures. One of them was the Egyptian goddess Taweret, who has the head of a hippo and the body of a woman. And her sisters were referred to as the solar mothers. And what their role was to protect birthing mothers and newborns of all species during the birthing process, and also to usher the sun over being born over the horizon every morning.
Okay, so I had an opportunity to take all my clothes off and be cast by you. It was such a specific experience. It was like, like I'd never been cast before. And there's some logistics to it. Like, for instance, you had to put Vaseline all over my vagina and then put a tiny piece of saran wrap over it. And it was...
This is a little more than I wanted to know about Virgie's casting experience. I don't mean to be a prude or someone like a purist or whatever you want to call it, but this is a little more than I was anticipating knowing. I don't need to know these details about the casting experience.
It was like you were so consent driven. You were like, is this okay? I'm going to put this. And I think you even had like a joint dangling out of your mouth at this point or something. And you're like, is this okay? Is this okay?
Oh my God.
So evocative.
I know.
I always envision you with a joint hanging out of your mouth. It's, I mean, that's not a judgment. It's actually very charming.
Oh, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful to weed.
So it's like I got cast and then I like started to panic and you had to cut me out. You and like your assistant had to cut me out of it. And you gave me some weed and then I started to freak out. And I was like, I've never been higher in my life. And you're like, you are not that high. Like you held it down in that moment. Like it was like the moment when the airplane was like crashing and you're like, we're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Oh boy.
And I felt...
This is quite the experience that they had. I don't know if, like, I partake in edibles on a weekly basis. So I know that they affect, and weed tends to affect everyone slightly differently. I don't know if someone was in the midst of a panic attack. I don't know why she had such a strong panic reaction to this, and it's not really my concern, but I'll be honest, I don't think I would give weed to someone who's having a panic attack. It works for some people, but if I don't know how someone's going to react to weed, there's a couple of different reactions of which I can think of, which would not be conducive to calming the person down. I don't know. I mean, she accepted it. Everything seems fine. Like, it's like, hey, if you want, it was all consent driven and all that, but I don't know. I don't think that was a very smart decision for the friend. And then apparently they're like, you're not that high. And I don't know. It's a whole weird thing all the way around.
I felt okay after that. I felt like I felt like that. You were just so emphatic, and I felt like I could trust you in that moment. I just want to tell you about the first time I saw Mia's show, once it all came together. Mia had invited the group of fat babes she had cast for the sculptures to be VIP guests. After the wine and cheese reception, we walked the windy path of the LA Arboretum to the greenhouse. And what we saw there was like something out of a science fiction fairy tale. Through the windows, I saw these incredible sculptures that had the heads of hippos, the tails of dinosaurs, and human bodies. Our bodies. I saw our bellies, our double chins and thigh rolls illuminated under the gallery lighting as if we were demigods. It was like a museum of witchy hippos crossed with a forgotten corner of Jurassic Park, and it was amazing.
I do believe that this is the most exciting work I've ever made.
Yeah.
And it's only just sort of like the beginning of the most exciting work that I've ever made, because all it did was just make me want to make better and more and crazier. And, like I just want to kind of keep writing it.
I mean, one of the things I love about this work is that, I mean, first of all, there's like the documentation of bodies that have largely been either completely deleted from the archive of Western art or are only portrayed to display sin or gluttony or, something.
Okay, it has not been deleted from Western art. There's plenty of old Renaissance paintings featuring of fluffy women that are still revered, are still like held up for their, technical precision, their technical beauty. And the women themselves are portrayed in a lovely romantic view, and it's fine. Like, let's not overhype our marginalization here. I don't know, like, everything goes through, here's the thing, everything goes through cycles. History repeats itself 800 times over and is still going. Human behavior is cyclical in nature. That's why some people's cycles are a bit shorter and they end up learning the same lesson over and over again. But on a larger scale, just as fat women were in vogue at one point, and I don't know if in vogue is even, I think that fat women at one point were a bit more revered because of famine, and it was a sign of wealth and all of that. I also think there were a few people during the Renaissance period that just liked bigger women, just as there are people that like bigger women now. And they happen to be painters, and that's maybe some of the art that we have now. I don't think that there's this conspiracy to delete your body type from Western art. I think people probably haven't done it in a couple hundred years because it wasn't due in time for the cycle of inspiration or whatever you want to call it. And it was only in the 90s that, I mean, does anyone remember the 90s? Like, you had to, like, skinny, like, ridiculously skinny was in vogue during that time. And now it's more slim thick, which is thicker. It's just thicker women, So, I don't know.
Kind of a deviation or a sign of immorality. I mean, in general, I don't see fat women's bodies being revered and loved. And I think there's also what I love is because of the nudity, there's like a documentation of the physicality of fatness that is so unique. Anyway, that's the last question I wanted to ask you was, I know you're still on the journey, but you're kind of on the other side of the line, right? Like, I just found out recently that 48 million Americans diet every year.
Yeah.
And so what is your dispatch? What do you know now that you didn't know when you were part of that statistic?
Yeah. I would say that to walk through that, that threshold or whatever of like being on a diet and committing to this like bullshit sort of like living in the future aspirational gobbledygook.
Yes.
To consider leaving it, you could only be like, well, then what happens to me? That is scary. But then I feel like once the door was even cracked a little bit open, you can't close it.
Yeah.
Because it's searing bullshit that you realize you were in.
Yeah.
Like just as soon as there's like a little inch of light going through, it's like, well.
You see all the poop garbage. The light coming in illuminates it.
Yes. We're like, well, okay, wait a second here. And the other thing is the parenting question.
Yes.
Because I feel really fortunate too to have sort of discovered this radical way of living in our culture, which is like without having a priority to shrink myself.
Okay, so I want to go back a little bit and just talk for a moment. I was waiting for them to reach conclusionary comment on this thing, but they're not getting there fast enough for me, and I don't want to lose my train of thought. But I do want to comment on her, living in the future gobbledygook bullshit that she claims. And I think that is the fat acceptance movement in a nutshell. They don't believe in forward thinking. There is... I do think it has to be tempered because I have a very bad habit of living in the future myself. And so I will overload myself to the point of extreme mental fatigue and burnout, and will put myself in a very bad mental place if I don't learn to temper my forward-oriented thinking and my future-oriented mindset. If I don't temper that with living in the present every now and then, I can burn myself out. So I think that there is something to be said for not living exclusively in the future for your future self. I think sometimes you do have to live for your present self as well. And I try to carve out at least one day a week where I'm like, I'm not worrying about anything. I just want to enjoy the day. Sometimes it's once every 2 weeks, but I try to make time for that. That being said, saying that living in the future for yourself at all is gobbledygook bullshit, to me just shows how much this movement is less about acceptance and more about hedonism. Not everything for living for yourself in the future is wrong. It's a really good idea, especially in today's climate, especially in today's world, that you consider your future self because no one else is going to consider them for you. You have to consider your future self, and sometimes that means sacrificing something in the present to benefit yourself in the future. So to me, it just screams hedonism, that statement of taking your future self and calling it gobbledygook bullshit. Sometimes denying yourself cake today means no diabetes in the future. It's worth thinking about. Even if you decide to go against it, it's worth at least thinking about.
I'm so grateful that it kind of happened when it did, as I had been, just becoming a parent, because there were so many things that I am seeing other parents around me do that are setting their children up for the exact same sad, painful relationships. I see it just with the way parents talk about their own bodies.
Right.
I never, ever, ever want there to be any shame around eating bagels, around bodies in bathing suits, around jiggling, around tickling, around, like anything that's kind of associated with like bodies and how bodies are funny and how bodies are hairy and smelly. And I'm trying to protect Galileo as much as I can from how the culture sterilizes and creates so much shame.
Mia, thank you for being here, for eating bagels that were not toasted, and for sharing your beautiful story.
Thank you.
Eating is a basic need. We have to eat. We rely on food for survival every day, all the time.
I'm not denying that. There aren't many people that would deny that. But that doesn't mean there's a difference between fueling your body and being a glutton. Like there's a difference, and that's the big issue with the fat acceptance movement, is I think that they treat it as all in one, and it's not.
Our bodies are built to enjoy eating. It's a basic biological source of pleasure. Beyond that, food connects us to other people and to ourselves.
There are other things that connect us to other people and to ourselves too, like hobbies. Hobbies that build skill, hobbies that allow escapism. I'm crocheting right now. This is one of my hobbies. I find it very therapeutic and relaxing, and it's becoming one of my go-to things for when I'm anxious. For example, this guy backed up in the middle of the road as I was going past him, and he ended up scraping my car. Not super bad, it was just paint damage, but I don't like dealing with anything car related, and it's caused me a lot of anxiety, and so I've been crocheting and drawing more this week because it's helped ease my anxiety. I could have just as easily gone to eating more and comforting myself with food. So there's alternatives to connecting with yourself, calming yourself, or connecting with others. It's far easier to connect with someone over a hobby than it is over food, because you guys can both acknowledge, oh yeah, the food's good, but then what are you going to talk about? How else can you connect with them? If you have a hobby in common, you guys can talk about similar creators that you follow, what your current project is, what you're focusing on right now, swap tips. There's so much more to I'm a big hobby advocate. Even something more affordable like skill toys at Kendama or Belgary. Like, there's far more benefit to hobbies than to glorifying food. And I think one of the big mistakes that the fat acceptance movement makes is that they make their weight part of their identity and food a hobby.
Part of our greatest moments of celebration, joy, and mourning. And for better or worse, it's tied to all the things that anchor us to the place we're from, to the people many of us will never be closer to, our family. My relationship with my family is complex, but now tamales remind me of the warm parts of our relationship, not the hurtful ones. I know my grandma was caring for me with her tamales. She was never trying to tempt or torture me. She was only interested in nourishing me. Nowadays,
that wasn't, for the record though, that wasn't diet culture that told you otherwise. That was your adolescent self-absorbed mindset, focusing more on outcome rather than intent. And I don't say that as derogatory towards Virgie. I say that because I did the same thing, where you assume everything that isn't what you want is a deliberate attack on you in some way, when someone genuinely just had good intentions. And I think that's just part of growing up, and I think that's part of being a teenager, is assuming that everyone understands your mindset, and part of maturing and growing up is understanding that people think differently. People have different things in mind when they do their actions. And in general, people, especially your family, isn't super likely to do something specifically to hurt you. There's definitely exceptions, toxic family members, mean-spirited family members. I have a couple of those myself where, no, I do think that they genuinely just are trying to be hurtful sometimes. But from the sounds of it, Virgie's grandmother was not one of those people. So it's not, I don't think that was so much diet culture invading her mind. I think that was her struggling with body insecurity as a teenager, and then seeing threats to that goal that she was trying to pursue of becoming thinner everywhere she went, and getting mad and feeling like people were deliberately sabotaging her because she couldn't see outside her own viewpoint.
Tamales are a big chunk of my food pyramid. I don't hate my body or food anymore, so they don't represent danger. Instead, they represent a small, delicious part of a very fraught inheritance. Every week at the end of the episode, I'm going to share a journal prompt that will help you think about your relationship to food. This week, I want you to think about one of your food inheritances. Write about food that reminds you of family, chosen or biological, it doesn't matter. What does this dish represent to you? What's its story? The joy, the tension, where it came from, the good memories and the weird ones, and how it shaped who you have become. If you want to write it down, you can send it to us at rebeleatersclub@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 862-231-5386, and your story could make it onto the show. 862-231-5386. When you're done, don't forget to give yourself the merit badge you earned, the All Food is Good Food badge. You can find the merit badges at rebeleatersclub.com. Just download the club starter pack. Once you have your merit badge, show me where you're putting it. Post on Instagram or Twitter with the hashtag #RebelEatersClub, all one word, or tag us at TransmitterPods. You can also find the merit badges on Giphy, so you can share the Rebel Eaters Club love all around the internet. And join me next week. We're talking to my friend Bailey about recovering from an eating disorder and learning about self-love.
Like, fuck accepting yourself. I love myself.
All right, so you heard the journal prompt. I want to see those responses in the comments down below. What is your food inheritance and how has it shaped you as a person? And include some family or memories or whatever in there as well. I guess I could share mine. I'm trying to think of one. My family's eating has evolved quite a bit from when I was a kid. We don't eat, well, I guess there is fry bread. So my family, I'm like 10% Native American, so that I don't consider myself Native American, but I have a Native American grandmother who's like 60% Native American, grew up on a reservation, or adjacent to a reservation, I should say. Her family made fry bread, and so we have fry bread. I don't actually like fry bread, but a lot of my family likes fry bread. We don't make it very often, one, because it's a time-consuming process, number one, and number two, because it's unhealthy as fuck. But we do have fry bread during the summer once or twice. I will typically have like one piece to be polite, and then not anymore, because I'm just not a big fan of fried bread. I just don't like it. It's too greasy for me. Perhaps that's just the way my family makes it, though. So I guess, I don't know if that really fit Virgie's prompt, but that's what I have for you. Something in that vein is fine in the comments. I'd love to, like, participate in this, but also if, like, the big meal that you think of when you think of your family is unhealthy and how you don't have it that much anymore, I would love to hear about, adjustments that you made to the recipe. Or maybe how you guys only do it for certain occasions or something. I don't know. I think that we could have fun with her prompts, adjusting them a bit to ourselves and how to live a healthier life. But that's my perspective. That was Rebel Eaters Club. Sorry about the lack of a Wednesday video again. I'm hoping everything in this turned out okay. And, I don't remember what updates I had, because I had given you guys some updates in the Wednesday video. I'm going to have to put that off until the Monday video, sorry. Because I don't remember what my updates are. But anyway, thank you for watching. Have a lovely weekend, and I will see you next time.